there, and welcome to the Hit Like a Girl podcast. My name is Joy Rios, and today I'm talking with Alana McGolrick, who's the Chief Nursing Officer at PeriGen Perinatal Decision Support Systems. Her work is focused on reducing preventable maternal and newborn deaths using technology and AI to support labor and delivery activities. In our conversation, she shares how the PeriGen Vigillence product removes bias that a doctor or nurse might have when looking at the mom's or the fetal heartbeat by providing objective assessments. Really great stuff. Let's take a listen. Thank you for joining me today, Dr. McGolrick. I'm really excited to get to know you and your place in the healthcare system a little bit better today. I like to kind of premise by saying, healthcare is complicated and it kind of doesn't matter how much you know or how much you've learned. There's always more to know and more to learn. That's one of the beauties about working in this industry. We liken it a lot to like a 3,000 or a 10,000 piece puzzle that we're all trying to figure out. We each hold a piece, and is there a way that we can make the connections and hopefully get farther faster in what our long-term goals are? So if you would please take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners and let us know, a little bit more about you and your place in the healthcare ecosystem.
Okay, well, my name is Alana McGolrick. I'm an RN. I've been in labor and delivery in the space of perinatal for a long time, so approximately 25 years. So I did stay in the service line that I enjoy. Some people laugh because I never wanted to do any other kind of nursing. So I've been fortunate enough in my career to have spent that time, growing my career pathway in this special population. I currently work as the Chief Nursing Officer at PeriGen. We have a artificially intelligent powered early warning system that's applied to the laboring patient that helps read the fetal heart events, trends, uterine activity, your progress in labor, and also helps to graph and trend the maternal vital signs and assists the clinicians at the bedside with decision-making with relation to the entire clinical picture of the patient.
Holy cow. So a really important piece.
Some really good things happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a big conversation. There is a big conversation going on around maternal and mortality rates in the US. And, certainly with certain demographics and people in our country, can you speak to that? You might be a little bit more well-informed and have your finger on the pulse of what people should know if they are not already aware, and maybe also what you guys are doing. What is your place in that? Are you helping to support, making those outcomes better?
So unfortunately, despite the fact that we have access to some sophisticated and high-level medical care here in the United States, we have a nationally rising maternal morbidity and mortality rate, which would be shocking to some other nations, because you would think that in the United States that our patients would not be dying during childbirth. And we're finding that 50% of those births those outcomes are actually preventable. So our moms and our babies should not be suffering a poor outcome or having some sort of severe injury related to the childbirth process. In the past, we actually treated childbirth and pregnancy in general as a wellness state. And unfortunately, we've had to shift to more of an illness state and look at those specific issues that are complicating our pregnancies these days. So we have, one is advanced maternal age. Our moms are waiting a little bit longer to start their families, beginning their careers and just taking some time to themselves prior to planning to have children. So that is the first thing that changed. Second is we're seeing access to perinatal care is really lacking. So, and that can be almost specifically related to their demographics. So we are seeing that moms of African-American descent are 3 to 4 times more likely to suffer an obstetrical hemorrhage, which is a severe complication of childbirth. We're also seeing that services in rural areas are being reduced to the point where we don't have access to a hospital even in those rural areas. And so, in some cases, people are traveling 100 miles to receive any type of care outside of a perinatal space. We're also seeing that our moms are much sicker. So they have comorbidities associated with their pregnancies, and diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, hypertension. Those things are leading the way. So that complicates a patient's pregnant picture to the point where not just the mom is impacted, but also the baby.
So I guess my understanding is when we're talking about like who is the most affected, I would like to think that on the other side of that is like, if we have that picture, if we have an understanding of who is the most affected, can healthcare providers or people that are working with those particular populations, like kind of adjust their care so that they're actually addressing them, with more attention or giving them, more of what could be needed. It's not an easy answer, and I don't even know exactly what the question is, but ultimately it's like, what can we do to change this? Because like, I just keep hearing it on all sides that it's kind of unacceptable. Like, and where do we go from here?
Right, and I think our clinicians, our physicians who are providing perinatal care during the antenatal stage, they are trying. They do the recommendations on nutrition and how to make sure that they're caring for their medical history, in addition to their current pregnancy and the developing fetus. But unfortunately, some of our solutions are, go out and take a walk. Well, they may not have access to a safe space to do that walk. There isn't a beautiful park that's nearby. We're also making the assumption that they're coming in for care.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody has access to appropriate care or thinks that it's important. So, where we see an average of 14 visits during the perinatal stage, some may not be having maybe 4, maybe 6.
Okay.
So we may not see them early enough. So I think they are trying to take steps to address these situations and really take a team approach to pregnancy versus, one physician caring for one patient. And they are seeing, multiple levels and trying to get the community involved so that they can have a healthier and safer delivery for mom and babe. The other thing is that everything is very subjective. Right. So clinician, we're just people. So we're, that's just part of our genetic makeup. So for us specifically at PeriGen, we've tried to remove that subjectivity and put something in place that was objective to say, I'm always scanning your patient with an objective eye to see if there's anything wrong and really alert you to any worsening conditions and trying to apply that throughout that perinatal stage. To assist the bedside and the delivering providers with some of that decision making, so they can make that sound judgment based on some objective data.
Okay, so can I ask layperson questions?
Yes.
Which is like, okay, if there's a pregnant patient who is coming into contact with PeriGen's product or service, is it something that happens over a period of time, or is it through an episode of care, like while they're giving birth?
Yeah, so they would have to be, I like how you put it, episodic. So yes, it would be, excuse me, during an episode of care. And currently our application is really for the 36-week and above fetus. For the fetal heart and for the uterine activity. But for maternal vital signs, we can trend from the beginning to show that there's an increase or a decrease. Naturally, women, when they get pregnant, they'll have an increase in their blood pressure. And it's just accommodating the developing fetus. We have 50% more blood volume. So our body needs to take that time to get used to the physiological changes. So you'll see these fluctuations, but by the second trimester, things should go back to normal.
Okay.
And One of the things with pregnancy, which, like I said, most have approached it with wellness. Now we've approaching it with an illness, is because pregnancy actually identifies or uncovers any physiological weakness that the maternal patient may have, because the fetus, definitely feeds off of whatever maternal resources they have. I call it a supply chain.
Sure.
So it has to feed off of that supply chain. And if mom's supply chain with her oxygen delivery, if she has enough hemoglobin in her blood, the fetus will either succeed or suffer based on what her supply chain can provide. So trending those vital signs early is very important. So we have a good eye on what's coming, for the rest of the pregnancy.
And so all of that information is gathered in an office visit, right? It's not something that happens with them regularly at home that is like an ongoing check in their blood pressure. Is that
correct? Correct. Yeah. So it would have to be a hospital visit.
Okay.
At this point. We typically do not use our product in the physician's office, but and this may be new to some of the listeners, but in what happens when patients come in for a wellness check, we call them NSTs. So they want to see if the baby is responding appropriately in utero. They'll send them into the hospital and they'll come into our triage areas. Or a labor and delivery evaluation unit. So then we put the monitors on the baby and we can start to track and trend the fetus's response, or maybe mom's vital signs, whatever they're coming for their checks. So that's really when it starts to apply and become meaningful to the clinicians making those decisions.
And what are some of the decisions that are being made that are basically like, there's plenty of decisions to be made, but what are some of the ones that are, I don't know, people should know about that, could have a change in their trajectory of their outcomes, right?
Right. So as these moms are at least they're at a period, so 36 weeks, we're close to delivery at this point, but still considered, preterm, because we want the babies to get to 39 weeks. We don't want to deliver any of those babies prior to 39 weeks because they say 39 weeks, chubby cheeks. So we want to make sure we get there. But if they're coming in prior to for those evaluation checks, it could, mean that there's an imminent delivery that needs to occur, or if those moms need to be watched for any medical issues that they may have on board, because all of those ones that I mentioned earlier, like obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes in particular, and then of course hypertension, they all impact how that fetus will grow. So if we see any changes with the baby, or if there's any issues going on with mom and she's not tolerating labor anymore, they need to make that decision whether baby's better inside or out. And that is specific to what's coming on the strip. So the strip will tell us, how the baby's doing. It's a squiggly mark. I always laugh because we're just reading. That's how the baby tells us if he wants in or out.
Really?
And in our system, we'll tell you, oh, that's an acceleration, that's a deceleration, and decelerations are bad. So we want to make sure that the baby's tolerating those decelerations.
So you want a squiggly mark. You want it to be more squiggly than straight.
Yes, we would like to see more squiggly. That's exactly what it is. We want to see, like, I call it the scratchiness. When you see new grasses growing, it's up and down and up and down. That's exactly what we want to see on the strip, because that tells us that the baby has an intact central nervous system and that he is well oxygenated at that time.
Gotcha. Okay. So what do you, like, sitting from where you sit and considering everything that's in your brain and what what do you wish people knew? Like, if you could just like impart them with some knowledge, or, either factoids or just like things that might be, empowering to them, what would help you and your job be easier if they knew X, Y, or Z piece of information?
So I do like this split personality thing. When, as a labor nurse, someone who's been clinical for so long, I want my moms to listen to their bodies. They're the first ones. They know their babies. They know if that baby's not kicking as much or moving as much. They know their sleep and wake cycles. And they also know when they're not feeling well. So I've been a firm believer, I've taught everyone that I've ever had the opportunity to be a preceptor for, that you trust your mom. If she tells you something's not right, and you have to listen to her, because physiologically she's experiencing it and we're just taking in that data. And then as someone who's now, had the wonderful opportunity to work in a space with artificial intelligence and and the IT world, which, some people teased me because I was very clinical. And then I came over to this side and went, wow, we can do this. Like, it's like seeing inside the uterus, which I do a national webinar series called the Invisible Patient series,
Okay.
because you can't see the baby. And
Uh-huh.
so for me, it was always, we have two patients. We don't just have one, and one is invisible. This baby is telling me what I'm seeing. I can take that information. And so, and make really sound clinical decisions and not feel like I'm just going on, maybe, I don't know for sure, because we are the eyes for the clinic, the delivering clinician. So we have to call them and say, I need you here now. And now we can say, I need you here now because, and take a look at this. So I think in both those worlds, that's probably what I'd say.
Okay. Now, what are some of the things that you teach? Because you're doing, it sounds like you've been really busy with speaking engagements and all kinds of stuff. So what is your rotation? Like, what are the things that you're speaking on? I'm sure that I'm not hitting on them. So I want to give you the opportunity to tell me.
So my first passion is fetal monitoring. So I'm a self-professed geek. I love everything about the physiology that comes along with a developing fetus. So my team would probably be laughing right now saying, yes, every day we get some sort of like blurb on fetal heart rate. So that's what I've been able to do here at PeriGen. We've been offering the Invisible Patient series almost on a 4-week basis. I do a complicated topic that involves the maternal and fetal response to that complication. And we provide it free to anyone that wants to join. We've had all the way from Canada, Hawaii, right across the United States, joining in on those webinars. And we do a strip review. So in my world, doing a strip review is a lot of fun, because you get to see the fetal heart and how it's responding to like an abruption or obstetrical hemorrhage, or even just an easy diabetic patient who's in diabetic ketoacidosis. So it's really nice for us to go through those complicated cases, because we don't always see them in your clinical practice. You just may not ever have one. So it's nice to see that.
So those are webinars aimed at providers more so than patients. Is that accurate?
Yes. So these are, our target audience is the RN, the MD that are at the bedside, clinically practicing, or just in the space, that work in OB. And so they are pretty clinical in nature. I think we probably scare some patients. They saw that, but they'd be well informed.
Right. Yeah. Maybe take away some of their fear factor if there happen to be any complications.
Right. Yes. My marketing manager was pregnant this year. She just had her baby right before Thanksgiving. And so she was, well versed in a lot of complications. I mean, to the point where she's like, I'm not scared anymore. She goes, you guys know what you're doing.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's great, actually. Well, so did you always know that you knew that this is what you wanted to do to a degree? You knew that you wanted to work, in the OB space or like maternal area. Like, did you know when you were 10 that this was, you're like, I want to work in healthcare and I want to help with babies and moms?
No, I don't have a nice story. Like most nurses are like, oh, I put Band-Aids on my teddy bear. No, I just, when I was a senior in high school and they said, you need to apply to university, I went through the list.
Yeah.
Just check nursing, and that's.
Really? You did an eeny, meeny, miny, mo? Choose
I
your own
did.
adventure? That is hilarious.
I knew I didn't want to be a school teacher.
Okay.
So that was eliminated. And I thought if I went into nursing, I would have a job when I came out. And so
it's everywhere. It's obviously something you can do anywhere and wherever you are in the world or the country. And it's definitely something that's needed no matter what. Like the need's not going away.
Right. So it parlayed into a great career. I was very fortunate.
And then how did you go in from nursing to the tech side? Like, because that must have been kind of interesting too, where a lot of people say like, oh, I was assigned as a super user for a particular, implementation or something. And that tends to be their foray. Was that similar for you?
No, I actually saw our senior VP of research, Dr. Emily Hamilton, do a presentation at A1, which is our National Association for Women's and Children's. And I was blown away by the technology. I just said, this exists, and why doesn't everybody have this? To me, it's still mind boggling that we're not in every hospital, that our
Okay.
footprint isn't bigger, because I just sat there and went, we need this at my previous company. And so I pursued them to see if we could get the product. At the time, the products that we have at PeriGen didn't exist. So you couldn't separate what Vigillence is, the early warning system, from their surveillance and documentation system, because when we put the monitors on mom, we have to document what we see. And so we couldn't separate the two. So at the time, that wasn't going to be feasible from a cost perspective for my former employer. And so the conversation ended there. And then they came back and said, hey, are you interested in a job?
Isn't that great?
And
Doesn't
I
that
went,
feel
yes,
good?
I
Yes.
absolutely want to work for you. Yeah. I didn't even care. We just, I just said, what do you got?
You're like, I love your mission. I love what
Yes.
you're doing. I want to
Yeah.
be part of this.
Yes. Yes. And then when I came over, I have the best team to work with. So, and I didn't know any of them. I just sort of came over and said, hi, I'm new.
I love that. I love that about like just kind of joining a place and being like, hey, we're going to be working together. And what do we need to do to make it positive? Like, let's be
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah, they're fantastic. They're fantastic. So I just really lucky, actually, because this was a passion for me, and I work with people equally as passionate.
Oh, that's great. Well, so if you could speak to any of the strengths from your team, like what are the things that they do that make it all worthwhile,
So I'm responsible for the clinical side of PeriGen. So my team are all certified RNs. They have only worked in OB. So again, we shared that, but their strengths are, which has been fantastic for me, is that they work with our clients like they're a patient. So sometimes we catch ourselves and call our clients patients. My patient needs such and such. And so, our motto has always been to give good care. No matter what, just give good care.
Yeah.
And so I think that it stems from them. I just follow their lead every day, and every client receives better than they did the day before. And again, I'm so grateful to work with them, because any of my weaknesses are certainly held up by their strengths. So
That's great. That's one concept that I really like about, working with people and also serving people. Like I think that when I was younger, you kind of have this belief that you have like clients, or in your case, like patients, and there's like this side and then there's that side. And then you realize that everybody you work with, you can treat like a client or a patient, I guess, or and providing good service to your teammate just as much as you would to whoever's on the other side of that, the business model. And that really makes for a like more synergistic way of
yes,
just working together.
yeah, yeah. And it's
Yeah.
easy to get up and come back and do it all again the next day with them.
Mhm. Well, what about advice? Do you have advice for either your 23-year-old self or somebody who was just, like, I think that's it. Like, if you were looking back at your life, what do you think you needed to hear when you were 23 that could have helped you on your journey?
Be patient. I had very high expectations, and I think at some point, the stress of those expectations and that ambition that I had was driving me almost to the brink. I think I tried to do too much at that age. It's funny that you picked 23, because I felt that I had already achieved all my goals, and I hadn't even gone back to school yet to get my master's or my doctorate. So I knew that those things were coming. And at 23, I was like, I'm already a clinical instructor. I mean, this is just insane how
Yeah.
fast this is going. So I think patience probably would have been it, and to appreciate every interaction that you have with your patients and with your colleagues that you're working the floor from. I still, to this day, recognize those mentors that took me under their wing as a baby labor nurse. They taught me everything. And I still see them to this day. And I will forever be grateful for the patience that they showed me and the kindness that they had showed me at the time. So, and then I've been lucky to have multiple mentors along the way that really built my career. So yes, patience probably would have been the best thing.
And do you think that that also touches on like endurance or even like patience with yourself here? Because you're like, I thought that I have this list of goals and I've achieved them all. So okay, I'm done. Or do you feel like that? Do you think that that's more like there's opportunity that you didn't even know existed that you probably like as a 23-year-old, how would you know to even look for something? Like it's like the patience in kind of waiting for the right timing, I guess, for things.
Yeah, I felt, I mean, I never would have expected that I would have ended up in IT.
Right.
So that was a surprise, that I was so enamored and so interested and driven to get into the IT space. Now, I'm not technical, so you have to understand enough about the product in order to teach how to use it. So I don't want to misrepresent. I am not a technical person, but I always thought that my path was going to be in administration and I would be running a hospital. I mean, that's where I thought I was going. And then to have that detour and to take that risk, I left a position that I had been in for some time. And so to leave that comfort zone, enter into something brand new and have no idea what they were talking about. So I had to be a beginner all over again. That was hard for me.
Yeah, that is
Yeah,
a hard thing to do. But I think that it's one thing of like trusting yourself of like, you know what, you have a skill set and expertise and knowledge in an area that even though, well, that can be applied to this new thing. You right? Like I think that
right.
your perspective, especially from nurse, even though you may not be the developer or the coder, like creating the software, behind the AI that's going on, you can certainly inform um, either the patients or like just like the experience of how it could go,
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah, that's been very helpful, thank
yeah,
goodness, because that's what they hired me for. It wasn't
right,
because I could write, script.
right,
It was, does this script work, in
right.
the clinical world? And so it's been nice to use my years of experience that way. And then certainly being in an administrative role anyway, as the CNO, it helps to have all that to fall back on administratively.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Well, I guess I just like if there's anything burning on your chest that you feel that people should know, I almost feel incapable of asking you the question, right? I'm just like, what is it? What's your message? I want to hear because I think what you do is so important that anything we can do to empower either our listeners or audience, I'd love to have that opportunity. So before we wrap up, is there anything that's like burning on your chest?
I think for me, I don't know if it's burning, but what I find when I'm out in the hospitals talking to, our target audience, which is the RNs or the delivering clinicians, is that they give artificial intelligence in healthcare a chance. Part of my presentation to them is, you are using AI every day. I'm like, who has the smartwatches?
Hmm.
You all have a smartphone. Do you use some sort of map application to get from A to B? And everyone, once that light bulb goes off, I think their acceptance of technology at the bedside, starts to, at least their mind starts to open, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, I do feel like, and it's just some old thing, but people don't like change.
Sure.
So you're coming in with something new saying this is really great and it's this newest technology, and they just look at you and go, I don't want to change.
Yeah.
So I just that would be my message, is that just give it a chance. We have AI, or we have technology at the bedside already. You just don't even realize you're using it.
Right. And I think to your point, just understanding of like how much farther, faster you could go by
Right.
letting it in. I mean, I experienced my own reservations, not about your guys' technology at all, but like when people talk about this metaverse stuff, I'm pretty hesitant.
Right. I don't want to be there, actually. I
Yeah, and I'm like,
appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like the future. It's in that sense of you're like, oh, if everything's gonna be like wired and connected through technology, like I think it's fair for people to be scared to a degree around like, well, what does that mean for our day-to-day life? But specifically in healthcare and specifically when it comes to the health of a mom or a baby or just like creating better outcomes for people, like I feel like whatever tools and resources that we have at our disposal we should use.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And I think that if we can reassure those that are caring for our patients, who have hands-on, that they won't be replaced. It's actually, the exact opposite, that they do need a subject matter
Mm,
expert to make those decisions, to appreciate the whole clinical picture, because in the end, it's just a calculator. It can't see what you can see. It can't touch what you can touch.
right.
So I like to, that's also part of our message, is that we still need you.
Right. So in addition to, yeah, I can see that being the fear of like, hey, if I implement this, it's there goes my job. What do you need me to do? Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
which isn't
which
the case
is the
at
exact
all.
opposite, because, although the machine is telling me what it sees, it doesn't know that the patient has diabetes. It doesn't know that the patient is, 6 centimeters and feeling pressure. It has no idea.
Yeah.
It's only as good as counting the boxes and graphing what data is coming in. So it still requires that clinician at the bedside. Someone still needs to labor the patient, and someone still needs to call the doctor when it's time to deliver. So um, yeah, it's not going to change. We need more nurses.
Right.
Yeah, you
Right.
can put that out there. We need more nurses. We're gonna have 1 million nurses who retire by 2030. We're just gonna be crushed.
And not only that, they have a pretty significant like mental burden. So if you're helping them to make decisions, and I know that like people everywhere are struggling from decision fatigue, and if your service and product is like set up to help them make decisions that are more accurate and faster and get them farther along their journey so that they can like save their brain space for something that's actually something that AI can't do, to your point.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it just reinforces what they're seeing. So the naked eye can't see everything,
No.
and we're infallible. So for them, it's just another tool in the
Yeah.
chest. Mhm.
Well, thank you for this. I definitely feel like I am learning, and that's just part of this whole. Like, I'm like, there's so much I don't know. This is an area that I am. As you can tell, I'm just like, oh, this is new stuff for me. I mean, on a personal note, like I've never been to a birth. I've never been in the room where that sort of stuff
Yeah,
happens, and so I'm just like, oh, tell me everything because I feel really naive. So thank you for sharing.
welcome. You're welcome. It's fun.
If people want to connect with you, follow you, work with you, where would you direct them to do so?
To PeriGen.com, all my information is listed there, so you can certainly access that. I am listed on LinkedIn. I am terrible at social media. I know in this day and age, I should be better. My marketing manager is much better than me. She does all my stuff.
I can understand.
I just have not gotten into it. I know. I
No,
should.
that's okay. It seems like you're busy doing really important things. So I like
Yeah,
your
I have some
attention
other
where it's
things.
at. Yeah. Well, thank you again for this time. And I will include all that information in the show notes.
Great. Thank you so much.